All right, what's up to YouTube? This is Tien bringing you a build guide, build showcase maybe on Mana Guide, Mana Stacking Sorcerer. A new item was released in this latest patch. I just hit level 100 on my character named Mana Guide, please be good. We went into the season knowing this item would be released, and we kind of tried to just build around it. And so, I've been getting some questions on stream about the build, and so I just kind of wanted to put this guide together for you. Mana Guide, so what is it? It's an amulet that takes focus, ton of text here obviously, but it takes focus, which is normally you stand in place and you channel, but now you can move while channeling. And a bunch of other text on there as well. Mana regen is halved. All of your armor is halved while channeling focus. And you get some mana regen, some ward decay threshold, some lightning res. And then of course it's a legendary, so you can slam it if you get legendary potential. This particular one had 3 LP and we hit mana, shred, and frailty on here. I would have preferred like crit multi over frailty, but anyways, so focus. It has a lot of different things going on in the tree. There's kind of this upper section that cares about like the ward from burst. So after channeling for 1 second, you get a burst. We don't spec into that at all. There's also this while negative mana. People familiar with mana stacking in the past, one of the ways you can use this kind of while leveling is if you ever go negative in mana, you can use it while negative and it'll give you even more of a burst. And then there's this whole health regen or ignite side. We don't care about that side at all. What we do care about is this left side. And the main thing is energy overflow. And this is why we're mana stacking. This is why we're sorcerer. And this is kind of what we leaned into kind of as a build. So energy overflow. You unleash waves of lightning with base damage equal to the percentage of your maximum mana. The more points you put into this, the more damage you get. 60% of my maximum mana I get as base lightning damage. Even more of that when I'm at full mana with unstable energy. 150% of that is now my base. You can see when I hover over this, I have like 1.3 million damage per second. Over here, my face is kind of covering it, but this increases the frequency of the energy overflow. And this is the big lightning novas that come out when I'm channeling focus. The rest of my gear is pretty typical. I'll go over each of the pieces kind of individually later, but it's kind of like a typical mana stacking setup. You try and get as much mana as possible. The Wrongwarp is maybe the only interesting thing. So it comes with an 80% move speed penalty, but we do some things to like make our move speed pretty decent actually while doing monoliths and bossing and stuff like that. But yeah, let's go ahead and just start, I guess, with the skill tree. So sorcerer, why are we sorcerer? We start out in mage. We level as glacier, by the way. So, typical mage leveling. We grab int, we grab mana. Mage Flurry we take for cooldown recovery speed on teleport. This is going to be important later for our Wrongwarp. And then I picked up Knowledge of Destruction for some crit multi. These points aren't that efficient, so maybe it's better in mana, or maybe we could mess around with Arcane Current or something. Okay, here in Sorcerer, we pick up Arcane Momentum. If I've cast 5 spells in a row, I get a whole bunch of cast speed, but I don't care about cast speed. I care more about movement speed. So I get 10 movement speed when I'm at max Arcane Momentum. Calculated Destruction, spell crit. I do care about crit. I want to crit with this big lightning thing that I'm doing. Mana and mana regen. Important. More int, ward decay threshold per int. Lightning leech, lightning penetration. Crit multi. And then I take all of the keystones for the sorcerer, and they're all pretty important for our build. So this one gives triple spell damage if I'm over 1,000 mana. So I think it gives 15 spell damage. It also gives refund costs, but other mana stackers care a lot about mana and mana spending. The refund part of it with like lost knowledge and things like that. We're not actually doing the mana spent gained as ward type stuff, but we're just taking this for the increased mana. and the increased spell damage from this node. Increased cooldown recovery speed. Remember, we really care about that teleport cooldown recovery speed. Here in Rune Master, we grab more int again. This one gives int and then also gives reduced bonus damage from crits, which we actually max out in our build. And then my last points as I was leveling to 100, I put into Sphere of Protection. And then 5 points of Spellblade, we grab some ward and some int here. This is ward gain on melee attack, but if we put 5 points into it, we get ward decay threshold per int, which is a stat that is somewhat important as we are generating ward. Okay, so how are we kind of doing defense in this build? It's a little tricky because, like I said, we don't do lost knowledge like typical mana stackers or mana spent gained as ward. Instead, we're kind of staying on topped out mana all the time. But you'll notice as I'm teleporting here that my mana is actually going, or my ward is going up. And that's because of the transient rest boots. So the transient rest boots, these boots are pretty popular for mana stackers, because if you maintain a high amount of current mana, which we do, we're always on topped out mana for our focus, we gain 60% of that as ward when I stop moving, and it's on a 2-second cooldown. My teleport, we've reduced it down to 2.7 seconds. I think we can get it to like 2.4 as we get like buffs and stuff like that. So every 2 seconds, basically, we're getting this transient rest when we cast teleport, and so that's a big part of our defense. But you know, that's kind of not enough. If we take a big hit from like a unique enemy, we have a Grasp of the Blood Mage, also a new item here, but we stagger that damage over 4 seconds, and so that kind of lets us put our leech to work, put our ward gain to work. If we can stagger at least a little bit of that damage, it'll save us from getting one hit. That's kind of our defensive combo. On top of that, focus itself kind of gives some damage reduction. So we have like damage taken from shocked enemies minus 20%. And then damage taken from shield enemies minus 8%. If I got even more plus the skills, I would try and, you know, max this out. Plus levels to focus is actually one of the biggest mods that we care about. You can see on my helmet here, I got +4 to focus. That's the one that I guaranteed from the Temporal Sanctum. I wanted to make sure that I got +4 to focus, but you know, maybe I could use like a +1 mage skills relic. I've been dorking around with the idea of maybe using knowledge of erased mage. So there are other ways to get more skills. And again, that every skill point is pretty valuable for this, because we have to spend so much in focus getting the damage, like 15 points or so getting damage, that we don't have room for some of the great defense that that focus has to offer. Okay, so let's cover some of the other skills, I guess, before I do the gear. So Lightning Blast, this is something that I tried to scale originally. So Mana Guide actually says you cast a Lightning Blast once per second, and there's other skills that can cast Lightning Blast pretty frequently. So you can do static with a setup that, like, you know, overloads, and then you're constantly casting Lightning Blasts. You can actually set up your Frost Wall to also cast Lightning Blasts. So you could have like 3 different sources of Lightning Blasts going on that are being casted automatically, kind of as you're teleporting around. But I said all that to say Lightning Blast kind of sucks. Like, it just doesn't have great multipliers. I dorked around with it quite a bit. I tried the Shatterstock Shock node. I tried this Chain Lightning one, and the one that like lets it chain over and over to the same spot, single target wise. This one was kind of bad because it adds mana cost, and if you're frequently casting Lightning Blast, it'll take you off of topped out mana. And so that was just something we couldn't lean into. So instead what we use it as like kind of a Lightning Aegis applier and then a Shock Chance applier. That's about it. We also do some shock charge scaling, but honestly it's not that important. Before you get reduced damage from crits, what you could do is you could spec into Blind Chance, and I think that's actually pretty good. This goes up to 45% with 3 points, and then 45% of the time the monsters can't crit you if you blind them, basically. Okay, teleport, pretty standard teleport tree here. We take all of the stat buff duration, and then the cooldown recovery speed. This node is actually pretty important, global cooldown recovery speed. With Frost Wall, our Frost Wall is going to be casting Flame Ward, and so this global cooldown recovery speed helps the Frost Wall cooldown faster than a Flame Ward normally would. The last 2 points I put into Elemental Affinity. I think if I had more points, I would pump the Elemental Affinity. Flame Ward, we don't actually directly cast this skill, but our Frost Wall does. What we do with this is we just use it as kind of a damage buff, as well as a less hit damage taken, less elemental damage taken. We also use it as a little bit of a damage buff here with Through Flames. And then the Frost Wall. The Frost Wall is kind of interesting. We leave this a cold skill. I know that there's lightning stuff I could take, shock stuff I could take, but we leave it a cold skill because this is where the multipliers are for this. So it has like increased damage against frozen enemies. But most importantly, it cleanses ailments, which is something that our build kind of struggles with. And then it also gives us Flame Ward, and it gives us Haste and Frenzy when we pass through it. And so how I'm playing this build is I'm actually just holding down Q and W, and I'm casting Teleport every time it's on cooldown with my right click. And when the Frost Wall is off cooldown, it will automatically cast the Frost Wall for me, and then I'll just kind of run through, make it a point to run through the Frost Wall. So that's kind of how the gameplay goes. These other things on my bar, I rarely press. Snap Freeze and Lightning Blast. I was doing something with Lightning Blast where I manually casted it a bunch of times to give it additional chains, and then I get this increased damage, increased crit chance buff. But honestly, it's like, it's a bit to manage. It's something to do, I guess, while you're at range. You know, some bosses have like big AoE type things where you just kind of have to wait outside, and you can't be next to them doing this this Nova type action. So yeah, that's kind of why Lightning Blast is on our bar. Snap Freeze, again, you know, just a utility, good with nothing spec'd into it. You could probably talk me into doing some other skills here, Static or Static Orb, because we do scale so much Lightning and Lightning Crit. Okay, let's get into the blessings, I suppose. I grab mana because we are a mana stacker. I grab armor, both of the flat armors and the increased armors, 20 to all res, and then crit strike multi. Remember, we do crit in this build, so we do care about that. Everything else I don't think really matters in the blessings. Let's go over the idols real quick. So I take percent mana idols. Ideally, I'd get percent mana and flat mana. You can get that. Those are very rare, obviously. You know, I'm in solo character found, so you know, if I could trade, I would trade for those. And then with the new Weaver things, you know, there's some good ones in there for us. Reduced damage from crits, increased armor. Crit strike multi is good for us. But I kind of, you know, just take what you can get. The rest, I just kind of plug whatever resistances I'm missing. I happen to need, you know, necrotic res. Some of my smalls, I needed cold res. After I teleport, I'm capped on cold res there. But yeah, just anything you can get. Kind of mana is as a priority. You can get up to 12 mana on the smalls, and yeah, on these you can get up to 8%. There are 4x1s as well that can, I think, go all the way up to 12, but those can't roll the mana prefix, so just something to look out for. Okay, so I covered the mana guide. I'll go over like slam priorities. Slam priorities like mana, and then I think multi, and then armor shred. After that, anything else is a nice to have. Frailty is a source of defense. It's a less damage multiplier, so Frailty is not dead here. Peak of the Mountain, +4 to focus, again, is probably the most important thing. I would love to have another mana or int prefix on there. You know, whatever resistances you're missing. Reduced damage from crits would be good on here. Flat armor would be good. Ward and Ward Threshold are very good. Unstable Core. This has a huge mana range on it, so just something to look out for. It rolls from 10 to 120 mana. So you kind of want to make sure it's a good roll before you slam it. And then when you slam it, you want to slam it with a tier 7 mana Ideally, I would have hit int here instead of Fizz Res, but yeah, we're like way over capped on Fizz Res. But you kind of take what you can get. Wrongwarp. I believe crit multi is slightly more valuable than flat mana for our build, just because of the way that the ranges on the mana and the crit multi works. So I went crit multi here, mana. I hit shock on hit as a suffix. I would have liked to hit lightning pen, I believe, would have been a better suffix. And offhand, the crystal skull, you want the spell crit strike chance to be 6. I have other items that allow my spell crit strike chance to be over 100, but you can see if I don't have like a Peak of the Mountain yet, maybe I'm using an Exalted Arcane Visage or something, I might not be capped on spell crit. So if I wasn't, I would use a 6 spell crit crystal skull. Again, we want high on the int as well. Those are just the implicits. And I prefer tier 7 mana with tier 5 multi. Whatever resistances you can get here. This would also be a good source of slow on hit, which is a decent defensive layer. The Ocean Ring, this is just a good ring in general. We care about chill, we care about shock. Our focus is constantly applying both of them, so we get the less damage taken from chilled enemies, which goes from 2 to 4. You want a 4 roll on that. And then the more damage per stack of shock, that's always 1%. The more shock chance you have, the faster you apply the shocks. So the faster you can get to that 10% more damage per stack of shock. Phantom Grip, again, this was being used to cap out my crit chance. That goes from 1 to 2% on crit strike chance. This isn't increased crit strike chance, this is base critical strike chance. So all of your increased crit strike chance works on your bases. So it makes Peak of the Mountain, work. I think this is my only source of increased spell crit, and so the base crit is pretty important for that. We slammed it here with int and strength. I think I would have preferred maybe int and like ward decay threshold if I could have. Okay, Grasp of the Blood Mage. Again, this is a staggering damage thing. Here you could just use Arcane Bracers. It's more mana. But I felt like this kind of helped a lot. And again, this has that base spell critical. It goes from 2 to 4. Got a 4% roll on here. I really like being capped out on crit. And then it has the damage stagger. The big drawback of these items is that 250% of your mana that you spend is reflected to you as damage. Well, we don't spend mana. We're just at, topped out mana all the time. The only thing we really spend mana on is teleport. It costs like 8 mana. And because we're regenning a whole bunch, right? Our Frostwall does cost a decent amount, but you can see here we stay pretty topped out on mana all the time. So this was more meant as like a detriment to the big mana spender builds. Transient Rest, talked about this at length already. The slam I would prefer here. Oh yeah, the slam I prefer on the gloves is mana. So tier 7 mana first, and then maybe Armor Shred second, Frailty third. Int is also great. Transient Rest, I would prefer tier 7 move speed. Int, reduce damage from crits. I have 89% reduced bonus damage from crits. Would love to have that more capped out. Stormcarved Testament. Again, prioritize tier 7 mana. I only have a tier 6 mana roll on here. Yeah, we're level 100. Still have stuff to grind. I have a 2 LP one that we're working on, but this is what we use to grind. Stormcarved Testament is just a great, unique in general. Has flat mana, which we care about. Has a bunch of lightning stuff that we care about. Lightning Pen is actually a pretty good stat for us. Shock already shreds a little bit of lightning res, but getting more Lightning Pen is great. For a long time, I was actually using, just talking about Lightning Pen, I was using this Velatra Stormcrown, which is just good. It gives +1 to lightning spells. When you put this on, you actually, you get +1 to focus as well, because you turn focus into a lightning skill by hitting energy overflow. So just something to think about with the Velatra Stormcrown. It just gives great stats in general. Shock chance per intelligence. Again, it gets you to that shock cap faster on enemies, and you're really, the way that you do monoliths on this, you're really just going really quickly. So yeah, you can use that. You can use just like an Arcane Visage. I think I was using this one for a while. It has tier 7 of the set mod and then some spell crit on it. And then this is how I capped my reduced bonus damage taken from crit strikes. Yeah, I was using 2 ocean rings for a while. And then lastly, the belt. The only mod on the belt that we care about is this reduced bonus damage, but cooldown recovery speed is great also. Remember, we want to be teleporting as frequently as possible. And then ailment cleanse is really good. I think if instead of this traversal mod, sometimes it's good in a pinch, but I would prefer to maybe have like lightning damage on there. Maybe another suffix or like a sealed suffix. You could also use uniques. One unique that's decent is this new innovation belt. It just gives straight up crit multi. It gives increased spell crit, again, to work on your base spell crit, and you can slam it with whatever. You can see here I slammed it with tier 7 lightning damage and just use this for a while. Okay, that's it for gear. I guess I could demo a little bit on what the play style is. We'll just go ahead and run a random mono here. Okay, it's the new arena type. So gameplay wise, I'm just holding down Q and W and pressing teleport on cooldown, and just running next to mobs. So both the best and the worst thing about this build is that you're moving all the time. So things like spires, you know, those birds that cast that, you know, ground effect or whatever that you have to move out of. See these like fireballs that are, you know, or meteors or whatever that are coming down on me. I'm moving, so I just don't care about those. Or like, I do care, but I'm just never going to get hit by them because I'm just constantly moving. The worst thing about this build also is that you're constantly moving. So like some bosses, you know, when they do their pizza attacks or whatever and you have to dodge, sometimes you kind of want to just stand still. And you can, like, you can just let go of the buttons, but then all of your DPS stops. And so, you know, do I consider this one of the best bossers? Not really. But it was a treat to play all the way up to level 100. I absolutely love this build. You can see there we did a champion fairly quickly. The single target's quite high on this build. The more mana that you can stack. I think we're pretty finished with this build for now. That's kind of why I'm making this video. My goals from here is I'm probably going to pivot into like a frostbite build. But I just kind of wanted to catalog what we did with this build and put out the guide for anybody who's interested in playing with this new unique called Mana Guide. That's it for this video. If you guys have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If there are a ton of questions, I might put out a second video kind of answering those questions. But yeah, that is it for now. Thank you guys for stopping by, and I will see you guys in the next one. GG's.